We've all been there. The one skein you don't know what to do with. The one ball of yarn that's been in your stash forever. Maybe you bought it in a frenzy at a yarn store or somewhere else and you didn't really have a plan for it and it's been sitting there for years. Maybe it's like a really special skein of yarn that is so special that you haven't used it. Or maybe it was gifted to you by a kind soul that doesn't know that one skein of yarn usually cannot make a whole sweater. In most case scenarios, at least for me, a lot of the yarn left that I have one skein of is maybe from another project that I bought an extra one or that I ended up needing less yarn for, and I have one skein or almost one skein left from just another project. Regardless of how it got there, we all have that one-off skein of yarn or several that we want to use but don't really know how. In fact, I would say that my own personal yarn stash is made out of mostly one-off skeins because I don't know what to do with them. And I've been slowly chipping away at my stash, just really trying to use it. And that meant getting really creative about how I'm using those one skeins. I personally tend to only buy sweater quantity of yarns when I have a project in mind. So when I don't have a project in mind, but I still want to buy yarn as a souvenir, or if I'm going somewhere special where they have yarn, I tend to buy fingering weight yarn because it tends to be a little more versatile. Like you can always make socks, for example, if you really have no idea what to do, and a few other projects that just go really well with fingering weight. If you're in a similar position of finding all these I don't know what to do with skeins of yarn, I wanted to tell you a story about what I recently did with one of those skeins that I had in my stash for a couple years and that I finally used, and I'm really happy with the result. The specific skein of yarn I'm talking about, and I may or may not have a picture of it, I will try to find one, was a skein of Zorilla fingering weight yarn, specifically sock yarn, that was gifted to me a few years ago, and I was gifted a few different colors and I used some of them for a project together to make a shawl. But then I had this one extra one, kind of like a grayish color. I really liked it. It was about 400 yards of fingering weight. So I didn't really want to use it to make socks, even though that's what it's meant for, because I feel like when I have 400 yards of fingering, it's a little too much for socks. Like I always have leftovers if I make socks. And the color itself, I was like, I think this deserves something that I'm going to be wearing more, not so much something that goes on my feet. I don't know. It didn't feel like sock material for me for whatever reason. I just wanted to do something different with it. But of course, I only had one skein, so the options were limited. And not only that, but I couldn't even buy more of the same because it was a collection from a few years ago. It was already discontinued. So that was, unless I went on Ravelry, like just digging for someone having the same yarn and maybe even the same dye lot, because they could, they could really vary the color. So I didn't want to go that direction. Instead, I thought, okay, 400 yards. Can I make a shawl with 400 yards? I've been really into making shawls in the past couple years. It was something that I really didn't make before, and now that I got into it, I like really enjoy making them and wearing them. And so it was a great idea of making something, and I thought maybe I could find a pattern that, depending on how big and how it was shaped, the shawl would be big enough with just 400 yards. Like I knew I had limitations. I went into Ravelry, and if you guys don't use Ravelry, I don't know what to tell you. It's just the best tool for finding patterns. All of the patterns that I recommend, I usually find on Ravelry, and I use it so much just to save stuff. And they also have a really good search tool if you've never used it. If you click on advanced search, it allows you to actually look very specific things for patterns. So you can look by knitting or crochet or other types of knitting like loom knitting. So many options. You can even look for free patterns or paid patterns. Like there's so many ways of searching, and so that really helped me get into what I was looking for, which was a shawl that was under 400 yards or around 400 yards and using fingering weight yarn. And I got a few options. So here were some of the runner-ups that I did not make, but that I thought were good options and maybe I will make in the future. The first option that I did not make was the Momento shawl. And I actually still really like this one. It was pretty much the runner-up. I was between this one and the one that I actually ended up making. It's beautiful, really beautiful, and the only reason I didn't make it is because I really wanted to make a more triangular type of shawl, and this is more of like a rectangular kind. And so I didn't end up going with this one, but I definitely saved it and I think I will be making it in the future. I really love, as you'll see with my other options, I love lacy shawl patterns. So this is a really beautiful one that definitely will make, but not this time. And this shawl requires 437 yards. So even though I was 37 yards short, I felt like maybe I could have made it and like come under, maybe slightly smaller depending on how it's constructed, but this one did not end up being the selected one. The next shawl option called for exactly 400 yards, and it was the Venezia shawl or Venice shawl by Joji Locatelli. And it, again, beautiful shawl. Because you have a smaller quantity of yarn, they tend to be more like in scarf kind of situation where like more rectangular and like longer and thinner. It's still a beautiful shawl. I think it would look really nice. I don't know, maybe because in the example she had like a type of yarn that had a little bit of not a gradient, but like variegated color, like very subtle. It made me think that this yarn wasn't the best option for this pattern, and then maybe if I ever have in the same problem where I want to make a shawl with 400 yards, I could find a better yarn for it, if that makes sense. So this was not selected, but really high on the list. And then the third shawl that I almost made, but I didn't, was the Lucy shawl by Gregoria Fibers, which also was 437 yards. So again, I could have probably made it and come under. And again, very beautiful, very lacy. I love all that stuff, simple, repetitive. This one is triangular, so it was a good option. And I think this one I was almost making that one. But to be honest, the reason I didn't make it is, and this happens to me a lot, where like I find a pattern and the sample has a certain color and I'm like, I want to make that one. So because I saw in the sample this pattern as like a white shawl, I was like, I really want this to be a white or like really light color shawl one day. So even though this one was like a really light gray yarn that I had, I did not end up making this one. I chose another one and I'm happy with what I chose. So what was the pattern that I did actually end up choosing? It was the Traveling Woman shawl, which ended up being the most customizable of all the options that I had. And that was partly why I wanted to do it, because I felt like because it was customizable, if I came under, I could still make it and have enough yarn. So the Traveling Woman shawl is a very simple triangular shawl in shape. But it has a really beautiful shawl detail at the bottom. So it has some stockinette and then some lace. So that was another nice thing, that I didn't have to do lace the whole time. So it had like a nice little detail, but it also just a simple stockinette. And the nice thing about this pattern, like I said, is that it's super customizable. So it comes with different options for different weights of yarn, which is great because now I know that if I have another skein of any other weight that would be enough for making a shawl, I could still use the same pattern. So that's awesome. And it also has customizable options for the length. So depending on what yarn you have, depending on how long you want it to be and how much yarn you have, you can make this shawl in very different options. And you can, I think it even came with like because it has different wingspans, so like how big you want it to be. It could be like a really big shawl, it could be a medium one, it could be like almost like a scarf type of thing. So this was what I ended up going with, and I'm really happy, not just with the result, but like the process of selecting it and like just feeling more secure that if I run out of yarn, it was going to be fine, and it was. So I went with this pattern. And honestly, I am really happy with the decision. I think I got it right. The process of knitting it was really fun, and the only thing is that I don't know what happened, but while I was knitting this and some other stuff, maybe I just got really into it. Maybe I just have been knitting too much in general, but I injured myself like really badly by knitting too much. I basically gave myself golfer's elbow, but not golfing, knitting, which simply means that I was getting pain on the inside of my elbow. and it was radiating to my arm, and it was getting to the point that it was so bad. One day I woke up, the pain was so bad that I could not move my arm. Like it was locking, and it was really painful, and I couldn't do other things like type or like basically anything moving my arm. It just was super painful. So that was clearly a call for stop knitting. And I even got some PT sessions that really helped, and everybody at the PT place was really surprised that I injured myself knitting. But if you've ever had pain either in your hands or here or anywhere else because of knitting, you know that, you know, repetitive motions and not getting rest and not stretching and many other factors can result in something like this. So it was a very big call for help from my body to tell me to take it slower. So that meant that this shawl had to kind of take a little bit of a back seat for a while, and I did not end up finishing it in time for what I wanted to, which was a gift for my friend's birthday. So my friend's, I told her, like, I'm making you something. You're gonna have to wait a little bit until my arm's better. And it was really funny because I was so close to the end. I almost just had to cast off, but the cast off, because it's around the whole wingspan, was gonna take a while. So I really, really had to take a break, and it took me weeks just to cast it off, because I would do like 1 or 2 stitches and then that's all I could do. And even today, my arm's much better, but I still have to knit in really short intervals, or I start hurting myself, or like I get pain later in the day, and I don't want to not be able to knit ever again. So if you ever have had pain, I recommend you go to the doctor, or at the very least do some exercises. I do have a video on hand pain in general and exercises that help with that kind of stuff. But yeah, so even though I was really happy with the shawl that I chose, and the experience of knitting was really easy and really fun, because it all started with stockinette, and I love making triangular shawls because you start small and then it gets bigger and bigger. Before you know, you are like making a gigantic, have this really long rows, and it gets fun. And then once you're done with the stockinette part, you start adding on to the lace part of this shawl, and that part you have to pay more attention, but once you get into the rhythm, it becomes easier, and I think it ended up being really nice. Here's the final result once I finally very slowly casted it off. I think it worked great for the yarn that I had. Like I said, I'm really happy with the result, and I did end up gifting it to my friend who really loved it, which made me very happy. And it's not a huge shawl, but it is enough to go around your neck. It looks really nice. I guess, like I said, it was a fun kind of pattern, and I used like 98% of the yarn. I actually had a little bit left, which I was very surprised. I did not modify the pattern at all. I didn't add any extra rows or remove any extra rows to like be able to use the yarn. I just there's a part in the pattern where it tells you, like, if you want to do another repeat, you can, but you have to finish at this point and you'll need this much yarn. I forget exactly, but they make it in a way that you can really like customize, like I said. And even though I did not end up doing another repeat, and I probably didn't have enough yarn for it, I had enough yarn for the whole shawl, and I used up almost the entire skein. Almost. I really wish that I had used it all, but at least I did not lose yarn chicken. So that's a win in my book. So I guess the moral of this knitting story is that you can always find a pattern that will work for whatever yarn you have. You don't always have to have a pattern in mind and then buy yarn. Sometimes you can have the yarn and find the pattern. I guess also that shawls are a great way of using those one skeins of yarn that you don't know what to do with. And also take it easy with your knitting and don't overdo it, because you can give yourself pain and then you'll have to cast off 2 stitches at a time, and that's not fun. But yeah, I guess that's what I got out of this. I'm really happy with the results, and I'm definitely knitting this again at some point. I still have a lot of singular skeins in my stash, but at least I am one closer to using up my stash. So again, this is all a win in my book. I love to hear about what patterns you like to use when you are using up your stash, or when you have one skein that you don't know what to do with. I recommend that you subscribe so you do not miss my next videos. It's always very chill over here. I talk about my projects or things in my mind or knitting that I see or even just reviewing patterns that I make. So stick around if you want to hear more knitting stuff, and yeah, happy knitting.